Hey everyone, this is Jennifer, and today I wanted to show you how to make these adjustable wire woven rings. And this is the one that's in the tutorial. And if you don't mind, go ahead and hit this like button. That really helps me out a lot. That helps get my channel name out. And I really appreciate it when you do. It also helps me know what content you're enjoying, so I know to make more of that kind of content. And also hit the subscribe button, and then also hit the bell notification button so you are notified whenever I do upload a new video. And these rings, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about them. They're using just a real simple weave that is actually the first weave that I ever learned how to do and actually made one of my first rings out of. And these are woven with 26 gauge wire. If you're a beginner, I would suggest using 28 gauge wire just because it's a little bit easier to work with when you're first learning. And this ring is in gold. It has clear quartz and green aventurine. It is in rose gold wire, and it has rose quartz beads on it. This one is in silver wire with blue amanzanite, and I tried to find the darkest blue amanzanite to put on the inside, and then the lightest blue I put on the outside. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the tutorial. Please leave some comments down below. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment section and I will answer you back. And then also, if you don't mind leaving a comment telling me where you're from, I would love to chat with you all in the comments and just get to know who's watching my videos and see where everybody's from. So if you don't mind doing that, I would appreciate it. And I hope you all enjoy the tutorial, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Hey everyone, today we're going to be making a woven ring with beads. And I've already made two for this order, and I have one more to make, so I wanted to film it and teach you all how to make it. And these are fully adjustable because they're not connected there. So these are really good, especially for people with arthritis whose fingers swell. And I love how these sit on the finger. But if you're going to make one of these rings for someone, you do need to get a ring size because they're only adjustable to a point. And you need to have that basic ring size to go by. Because like if they say I made a size 5 ring, it's not going to fit somebody with the size that wears a size 9. It's not going to fit and look right. So you do need to get that basic ring size. And the wire I'm using for this is 20 gauge wire. I'm using 26 gauge, and these are both in silver by Parawire. But I'm also using 26 gauge, and this is for the weaving wire. I'm using this one partially because it adds a little bit of stiffness to the ring. But when I first started making these rings, I used 28 gauge. 28 gauge wire is actually the easiest wire to weave with, especially when you're first starting. 26 is a little bit more challenging. And the beads I'm going to be using for this are some amanzanite. I'm using two in a little bit a more darker blue. And then these two are very pale, just kind of a cream color with a very slight blue tint to them. I'm going to start out by straightening out some of my 20 gauge wire. And one thing I like to do, and this helps work harden it to just a little bit, is I like to straighten it several times. And that also kind of warms up the wire, but it seems to help harden it a little bit. So I'm just going to run my wire straighteners over the wire several times. But I'm just running my nylon jaw pliers over this a bunch of times to just to really warm up that wire and to get it so it does get a little bit work hardened. And I can feel my wire, and my wire is actually warm from the friction from the nylon jaw pliers. I'm making a size 8.5 ring, so I'm going to start out with 2 6-inch pieces of wire, and that will be more than I need, but it gives me room to work, so I'm just going to measure that out. And all the tools that I use in general that I've tested out and that I like are listed in the description below, so use that as a reference. for your tools. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you have any comments, I'd love to hear from you and interact with you. And for the 26 gauge wire, I'm just going to work off the spool. When you're working off the spool, you do have to be a little bit careful with it knotting up. So you want to make sure you don't have too much coming off the spool. But to start, what I'm going to do is, this wire has a little bit of a bend in it, so I'm just going to try to straighten it out a little bit with my fingers, just to get that so the weave will be a little bit more even. If you're wondering why I have my hands taped up, my hands get really sore, like from where my nail, when I'm weaving, my nail will hit into my hand, and the wire also rubs through here, but I get blisters and my fingers are real sensitive, so I also put it on this hand for when I'm holding it. But this is Nexcare tape, and it's just a nice thick foamy tape, and you can order it off Amazon, and I do have this linked below in like a 1-pack, and then also a 6-pack, which is what I bought because they do a lot of wire weaving. But it's a foamy tape that really protects your skin well, and I really like it, and it's helped me out a lot. And a tip that I have when making a ring like this is you want to have an idea of how far you need to weave. So what I did was I took a scrap piece of wire, and I'm just going to wrap, and I've already measured this out, so I don't want to lose that bend that's in there. But I can wrap this around my ring mandrel out of size 8.5, and I wanted to go just a little bit further than an 8.5 on the for the design. So I measured that out, and then I just did a bend, and then this piece broke when I did the bend because this is just some thin wire. But this gives me a good guide of how long I need to weave for this ring. So that is a tip that I use all the time when I do woven rings. So I'm just going to take my weaving wire, and I'm going to put it behind this wire. I'm going to come about 1.5 inches in, because I want to give myself room, because this weave tends to slide down when you compress it a little bit. So I want to give myself room so I have room for the design at the end. So I'm just going to take this piece of wire, the 26 gauge wire, or 28 gauge if that's what you're using, and I'm going to wrap it around once, and then I'm going to grab my pliers, and I'm just going to pull it really tight because I want that first wrap especially to be super tight on there, and that just helps to tighten it. And when you're weaving, you want to keep a nice tension on your wire in order to get an even weave. And so this piece of wire is going to come up in between the two pieces, so I'm just going to fold that down and out of my way for now, and we'll cut that at the end. But I'm just going to compress those couple wraps, and those wraps just secured the weaving wire to the base wires. Make sure I'm good with my guide, so I'm just going to check on where the weaving wire is and just make sure I have enough room down here. But the weave will tend to slide when you compress it, so I try to minimize that as much as I can, but you can't minimize it completely usually. And I'm going to slide this in and just give myself a little bit extra room, because I know this weave will slide a little bit when I compress it. So I'm just going to line these wires up and make sure, I always like to make sure the ends are in the same place, so one's not longer than the other. So now I want to lay my wires right on top of each other, and I want to have the smallest space between it that I can. And so now I'm just going to take it up the front and around the top wire, and I'm just going to pull it and compress it in a little bit like that. And now I'm going to go over the top wire, down the back, and around the bottom wire. When I come down around the back part, I just want to make sure that all my wires are nice and snug and tight and fitted up to the wire. And especially with 26 gauge, that can get off real easily. And then every couple wraps, I'm just going to compress it with my nails. So I'll go over it a few more times with you so you can catch on to this weave. So you just go up the front, around the top wire, over the top wire, down the back, and around the bottom wire. But I'm going to go up the front, around the top wire, over the top wire, down behind, straight down, and around the bottom wire. And let me zoom you in so you can see the pattern that it's making. So this is the pattern that it's making, and it makes a really smooth ring band that's comfortable to wear. And I'm going to slide this down just a little bit because I don't want to get too far down. There. And I'm just going to check this against my wire to see about where I need to stop at. And I do repeatedly during this check it against my little guide. I'm going to go up the front, around the top wire, up around the top wire, down the back, and around the bottom wire, and then compress. And up the front, around the top wire, up over the top wire, come down behind the wires, around the bottom wire, and then I like to compress. And you can compress every few rotations, or you can compress like each time you do a rotation. And like what I call a full rotation is doing the up the front, around the top, go around the top wire, straight down the back, and go down the front. And I consider that to be one full rotation. And then I'm just going to press it together. And you can get really fast with this weave once you get used to it. Because it's actually a fairly simple weave. And it's actually one of my favorites. So I'll show you that again. So I'm going to go straight up the front of the two wires, around the top wire, come up in between the two wires, go around the top wire, straight down the back, and around the bottom wire. And I'm just going to pull that in and compress. And I just want to just keep an eye on this and just make sure everything stays looking even. And I want to keep these wires as close together as I can. And I want to keep them as straight as I can because that'll help with when you're forming the ring later on. So I'm just going to go up the front, around the top, up in between the two wires, around the top wire, straight down the back, around the bottom wire, and compress. And I'm just going to run my hand down the wire that I have off my spool. And I don't have a ton of wire off my spool, but I do want to make sure that stays straight. And so what I'll show you one more time. So you go straight up the front, around the top wire, and then come up in between the two wires, go around the top wire, down the back, and around the bottom wire, and compress. And your weave should be looking something like this. I'm going to continue doing that, and then I'll be back to show you how I like to finish off this weave, because I like to do it a certain way. I like for the weaving wire that's coming up between the two wires to go a certain way. So because this is going to actually be the outside of my ring band, and this is going to be the inside of my ring band. And this just helps to prevent any extra scratching, and I will also make sure it's pressed in really well. One thing I really like about wire weaving is it gives you a chance to really get to know your wire and to really get a feel for it. And I found that really helpful when I was first starting. I do think it's very important that you get to know the feeling of your wire and how your wire works. And this is just a really easy way that you can do it. And you can also be making a piece of jewelry in the process. Okay, and since I'm getting really close to where I need to be on my weave, I wanted to go over the weave one more time, just in case you're just learning this and need to see it again. But you can see how far I am and how close I am to that bend in that wire. So I'm just going to go over the weave again. If you've got it down, just go ahead and fast forward through this part, but it won't be very long. So I'm going to go up in front of the wires, around the top wire, come up in between the two wires, go down the back, and go around the bottom wire. And then I'm going to go up the top, in between the two wires, around the top, in between the two wires, around the top, straight down the back, and around the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and compress that. But one suggestion I have, like with working with 28 gauge wire, is you do need to keep tension on your wire, but you don't want to keep so much tension that it's going to break. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Because I have had wires break on me, particularly the 28 gauge. Because I was putting too much pressure and too much tension on it. So let's see where I am. So now that I've gotten the weave to be the length that I need it to be, one thing you want to do is you want to make sure periodically that you try to straighten this and keep this as straight as you can. And the way I like to hold it when I get further down in the weave is I like to hold it like this, because otherwise if you're holding it in here, you're going to get this is going to bend on you too much. So just hold it close to where you're weaving at. And also that gives you a little bit more control. But since I've gotten the weave to be the length I need it to be, the way I want to finish this off is I need this wire coming out between these two wires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up the front, around the top wire, and I'm going to come up in between these two wires. And then I'm just going to make an extra rotation around that top wire. So now I'm good for finishing this off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Xuron cutters, and I'm just going to trim as close down in there as I can get. So now I'm going to use my bent nose pliers, and I find bent nose pliers to be the best for doing something like this because of the way they're made. And these are the ones by Xuron, and they've got a nice fine point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread these two wires out a little bit just so I can get in there, because I want to get the end of this wire. I need to spread that a little bit further, but I don't want to bend my wires too much. So I'm just going to grab the end of that wire, and I'm just going to rotate it, and I'm going to put some pressure on it to help flatten it out. Like that. And then I want to make sure that's pressed in. And then I'm just feeling it to make sure it feels smooth. Because even though this is going to be the outside of the band, I still want it to feel smooth. And so now I'm going to come back down here to the beginning to where we started. And I'm just going to pull this straight up, and I'm going to trim it as close down in there as I can get. With these Xuron cutters, you can really get into really close, narrow areas. So that's something I really like about those cutters. So now I'm going to take and do the same thing that I did on the opposite side. I'm going to spread my wires apart so I can get in here, and I'm going to take that end of that wire and I'm just going to rotate it a little bit while putting pressure on it to flatten it. And I'm just really trying to flatten that wire out. And I feel it right here, it's feeling rough. So I'm just going to put some pressure on that wire. And it still feels a little bit rough. So I'm just going to press it in there a little bit more. And that feels smooth. So I'm just going to move these wires back in place. And now I'm going to put this around my ring mandrel and go ahead and get it shaped. So I'm going to flip it over because I want this to be my inside, because I don't want to take any chances of a piece of wire poking someone even though it feels smooth. So I'm going out down here, I'm centering it, and I'm going to where the 8.5 is on my ring mandrel. And I'm just going to fold this around like that. And I'm just going to pull it as tight as I can. And that'll help me get my ring shape. And then I'll show you something I like to do at the end to get the ring shape too. So there's the basic band, and you see how it can be pulled and be flexible. So in order to get an idea of how short I need to cut the wires, I'm going to put the lighter bead of a manzanite on, and I'm going to press it all the way down. And then I want to give myself a little bit of length to do the little swirl. So I'm going to cut it like that. And then this one, so I'm going to take that bead back off for this while I do this. For the wire that's on the inside of the band, I'm just going to do it a little bit longer because you need a little bit more room. And then I'm just going to eyeball this on, and you'll get, the more you do this type of stuff, the better you get at eyeballing length. So I'm just going to, let's see. I think that looks good. And then I'm just going to go a little bit longer on this one. So this is what I have now. When you cut your wire, cut with this side of your cutters because it gives this, it makes this flat rather than pointy. And I think I want to cut off just a tiny bit more of that. I think that looks better, so I'll just leave it like that. And now this is an optional thing you can do. And this is just something I like to do because to finish off a piece, because it does help prevent any scratching. Could use one of these wire rounders that looks like this, that's manual, but that's a lot of work. So I have this electric bead reamer with this wire rounder tip that I bought to go with it. And it's just this little cup that has a file inside. And so then I just put this back down in here. But I'm just going to round off the ends of each of these so they definitely won't be scratchy on anybody's skin. That feels nice and rounded and smooth. So I'm going to show you the difference in between the two wires. If you can see how rounded and smooth that is right there, compared to that being really flat. That's why I do this, because this is harder to get smooth when you press it than this is, because this is already smooth and rounded out like that. So that's one reason I use this. And this, by the way, is a Beadalon. It's an electric bead reamer, and then it just has the wire rounder attachment that you buy separately for a few dollars. but I've been really, really happy with this. And this is battery powered, by the way. And the batteries last forever on these. So I'm just going to round out the rest of my pieces and I will be back. So all my wire ends are now rounded. And something I want to do is, this is just something I like to do to make sure that the inside of the band is perfectly smooth, is I'm just going to gently press this with some nylon jaw pliers. And just make sure that inner band is really smooth. Because I want it to be comfortable to wear. And this is also, I should have done this before I put it on the ring mandrel, but I didn't. And this doesn't press the wire down, like really flatten it out. This just smooths it out nicely, so that feels really nice in there now. So now I'm just going to wrap this back around my ring mandrel. The lady that ordered this requested that the little bit darker amanzanite be placed on the back, on the inside, and then the lighter be placed on the outside. So I'm going to start with the outside, and I'm just going to place my amanzanite, my lighter one on there. It's not a whole lot lighter, but it's a little bit lighter. And I'm going to push it all the way down to that wire. And now you can use your regular round nose pliers or whatever round nose pliers you have, but I'm going to use my Lindstrom fine tipped round nose pliers. This gives me a little bit tighter loop. So I'm just going to take this in the very tip and I'm just going to start twisting around gently. And I'm going to make I'm just trying to make at least a full loop if I can. And then I'm just going to let this bend on around like that. And then I'm just going to take my tweezer nose pliers and just make sure that is pressed flat. And then I'm going to place the little bit darker amanzanite on the inside. And I'm going to make sure that's pressed all the way down to the wires. And so I'm just going to flatten that out. And now I've put this bead on and I'm pushing it all the way down to the wires. And I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm just going to start making a little spiral here. And I'm just going to kind of come out a little bit from that. And then I'm going to just pull this around. So now I'm just going to pull this around like that. So I just pulled this around just to give it the shape that I want it to be in. And then for this one, I think I want to pull it out just a little bit. So I'm just rotating it. So I'm just rotating this with my pliers because I just want to pull that a little bit. And I'm just making sure everything's flat. And so now on this side, I'm going to place my lighter bead on the outside and press it all the way down to those wires. And I'm just going to take my round nose pliers and I'm just going to do that. Make sure I get that full loop in there. And then I'm just going to pull this around and give it that nice bend like that. Now I'm going to take the little bit darker amanzanite and I'm just going to place this on here all the way down to the weave. And I'm just going to take these round nose pliers and I'm just going to grab the end of it as close to the end of these as I can get. And I'm just going to make a nice little tiny loop. And any round nose pliers that you have will work for this. I just like the finer tip for something like this. And I'm just going to keep going. And then I'm going to use the back of my bent nose pliers to press this down, and then also pull this around like that. And to give it the shape that I want it to have. Just like that. And so that's what it should be looking like for you for now, unless you decided to bend them in a little bit different way. So now what I want to do is I want to put this back on my ring mandrel. For this, I'm just going to slide this all the way down, and this just helps me with getting the rounder shape. I'm going to slide it down as far as it'll go. I'm going to take my non-marring jewelry hammer, and I'm just going to very, very lightly tap this against the ring mandrel, and this will just kind of help give it more of a rounded shape. And I'm just gently moving it around. And I'm just holding it against the ring mandrel because I want it to have that really rounded shape. And just make sure you don't hit your beads if you do this. And this isn't something you have to do, but it's just something I've always done. So now that I have that more rounded, I'm going to go up to about an 8 instead of an 8.5, because this is going to open up a little bit more. And I'm just going to place this on here, and I'm just going to gently pull on it and make sure everything is pressed up against the ring mandrel really well. And I'm just pulling on it nice and tight, and just want to make sure this will, and then I'm going to go to the 8.5, and I'm going to pull it around there. I just find that going to a smaller size first really helps you get the shape and hold the shape better. So now I'm going to take this off the ring mandrel. So now I just took this off the ring mandrel, and you can see it has a really good rounded shape now. And this is perfectly smooth on the inside and out. And then this is your finished ring. And these are all all 3 rings together. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot. And it helps my channel get noticed more. And let me know if you try this and how it works out for you. If you have any questions at all, please let me know, and I'd be happy to answer them. And leave some comments down in the comment section for me. I would love to chat with you down there, and I'm hoping the comment section can actually be a nice little kind of community for jewelry makers. So anyway, if you could do that, and then also hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification button so you know whenever I upload a new video. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video.